Chapter 1. A month ago, I picked up a man. There was no other reason than the fact that he was exactly my type. As a 21st century woman who had read countless melodramatic novels, I knew perfectly well that one shouldn't just pick up wild men from the roadside. So when he grabbed my ankle that day, my first reaction was to turn around and stab him. He was dressed in black, lying on the side of the road covered in blood. He didn't look like a good person, no matter how you looked at him. However, he wasn't quite dead. He groaned in pain and struggled to open his pitch-black eyes to stare at me. Blood-stained eyelashes, eyes like ink, they were very beautiful eyes. I brushed away his wet hair and leaned in closer, watching as his expression shifted from the calm of impending death to disbelief and joy. Although it was only for a split second, I was intrigued. He looked a lot like the German shepherd I raised in my past life. It used to look at me the exact same way every time I came home. Because of my follow-up stab, he only stayed conscious for a few moments before fainting again. Before he passed out, he said 2 words. I didn't catch them clearly, but that didn't matter anymore. I dragged this man, who was over 6 feet tall and weighed quite a bit, for a full 4 hours. In the end, I collapsed on the ground in exhaustion and angrily kicked him in the butt. Too heavy, much heavier than my dog. After managing to drag him back to the courtyard with great difficulty, I thought for a moment and decided to throw him in the storage room. I stripped off his tattered clothes, looked at his abdominal muscles and generous pectorals, and unceremoniously reached out to touch them. They felt great, comparable to my ex-boyfriend's. I just got a hand full of blood. I wiped it off carelessly and simply treated his wounds. Giving him a stab really wasn't my fault. Reaching out in the middle of the night, who knew if he was human or a ghost? After wiping his face clean, I admitted he hit right on my sweet spot. Thick eyelashes, a high nose bridge, and thin lips. In short, he was the type I liked. While admiring him, I stripped the hidden weapons and daggers off his body. To prevent the first thing he did upon waking up from stabbing me back, I professionally bound him to the room's pillar with layers of iron chains. Joking aside, I cherish my life very much. I fed him medicine for 3 days. On the day he woke up, I was just stuffing a pill into his mouth. The man's raven black eyelashes trembled, and a pair of black eyes stared tightly at me. Then he looked down at the chains on his body, his expression blank for a moment. I quickly pinched his lips. Eat it quickly, don't waste it. He was obviously stunned for a moment, then his Adam's apple rolled, and he swallowed it. He didn't even ask me what the medicine was, nor did he spit it out. What a good boy. After he swallowed the medicine, we stared at each other. He was the first to speak. Having not drunk much water for 3 days, the man's voice was terribly hoarse. Miss Sterling, your subordinate has finally found you. Oh my, this was a development I hadn't expected. Having been out for so many years, I had almost forgotten that behind me was a wealthy family that liked to keep shadow guards. Years ago, I was also a wealthy young lady, the kind who had a row of guards following her when she went out very prestigious. I thought for a few moments, dug out the dagger I had taken from him, and in the next instant, pressed it against his neck. He didn't seem to expect I would do this, but still, he didn't resist, even lifting his neck slightly. Who are you? I asked bluntly. Miss Sterling, your subordinate is named Ethan Wright. I stared into his eyes, thinking left and right but couldn't recall who this person was. Given his handsome, cool guy appearance, it was impossible for me to forget. I had raised several shadow guards, all of whom were cool guys with broad shoulders, narrow waists, and long legs. Just because I had a premature romance and kissed one of the shadow guards, my cheapskate father was furious and replaced all the shadow guards around me with women. So I cuddled with the pretty sisters every day and took them to the host club to watch the gigolos dance provocatively. The sisters and I were quite happy. Only my father was even unhappier. He replaced the shadow guard sisters with uncles and said I was corrupting public morals, forbidding me from going to the host club. I couldn't cuddle anymore, so I ran away. Seeing that I kept a cold face, a look of disappointment rose in the man's eyes. He concealed his emotions and whispered, Your subordinate has never served by Miss Sterling's side personally, so it is normal for Miss Sterling not to remember your subordinate. I figured. If he had been by my side, he would definitely have become one of my ex-boyfriends long ago. I was silent for a few moments, then suddenly remembered something. You aren't going to say that because I saved your life when I was a child, you've been searching bitterly for me ever since I left, are you? He didn't expect me to say his lines. He froze for a moment, then nodded seriously. How did Miss Sterling know? There was hidden anticipation in his tone. I moved the dagger away and sneered. Because I have saved at least 20 shadow guards like you. He was stunned. He looked at me with disbelief and hurt in his beautiful eyes, as if I were a heartless lover. I have a shadow guard fetish. In the first few years after I was born into this world, whenever I was bored, I would go watch the shadow guards train. I only picked the good-looking ones. When they were scarred and battered, I would thoughtfully hand them a handkerchief and gently tell them not to get hurt, or my heart would ache. For the especially handsome ones, I would have the pharmacy send them the best healing ointments. When necessary, I would shed 2 tears, insisting on watching the cool guys apply the medicine. My concern was a light in their dark, unbearable days, illuminating the first half of their grim lives. This way, they would be more loyal to me in the future. I knew I was gaslighting them, but so what? A loyal shadow guard is a woman's best accessory. Ethan Wright must be one of the ones I saved, but I still wasn't at ease. He saw this, looked up, closed his eyes, and his tone returned to calm. If Miss Sterling is worried, then kill your subordinate. He wasn't using death to force me. He knew I would really do it. The hole I stabbed in him a few days ago was still oozing blood. Leaving a very light, bloody scratch on the man's neck, I withdrew the knife and fed him several kinds of controlling poisons. He didn't ask a single question and swallowed them obediently. He was very obedient. I was very pleased. When I fed my dog medicine, I couldn't even pry that stubborn creature's mouth open. I untied him. Looking at the red marks on his abs caused by my binding, I instinctively felt a bit of an urge. Your subordinate's body is ugly. I fear it will soil Miss Sterling's eyes. Seeing me staring at his body, he turned away in a low voice, a bit nervous. Oh, he was talking about the scars left from torture on his body. Actually, he didn't know that I had left similar things on my ex-boyfriend's body, even worse than what was on him. I stared at the groove of his spine and his narrow waist, becoming even more interested. I forgot to mention, his clothes were worn through when I dragged him, so for the past few days, he had been shirtless. Looking at the sky outside, I ignored him and went back to my room to eat and sleep on my own naturally. There was no share for him. When he appeared in front of me the next day, he was already wearing black clothes wholesale from who knows where, and he had an ugly mask on his face. Ignoring the ugly mask, the man in black, with his narrow waist and long legs and a sharp aura, was indeed handsome. Thank you, Miss Sterling. He knelt on one knee on the ground. I glanced at him and didn't respond. Thank you, Master. He corrected himself quickly, very perceptive. I tacitly allowed him to be my personal shadow guard and didn't plan to play any sticky, sentimental master-servant games with him. He was very diligent. There were no enemies in the mountains. What he had to do every day was go into the city to buy me roast chicken and chestnut cakes. Shadow guards have cheap lives. If you order them around, they are very happy. However, the 5th time I saw Ethan appearing in front of me wearing that mask, I finally couldn't hold back. Can you throw that ugly mask away? Wear this. Ethan took off the mask and took the silver object I threw at him, not understanding how to wear it for a moment. Master, this is a muzzle, I said concisely. Ethan glanced at me quickly, probably not understanding why something meant for a dog would be worn by a human, but he was very obedient. He did whatever I told him to do. The man was very good-looking. His nose bridge was high, his chin sharp and slender, the silver decoration fit perfectly on his face. Master! He looked at me, the silver tassels on the muzzle swaying. His handsome face looked a bit nervous. My heart skipped a beat. A perfect substitute. He could only be a substitute. Good, good, good. This is exactly what I love to see. At night, I called him out to accompany me while watching the rain beat against the banana leaves outside the window. How old are you this year? I asked suddenly. Ethan had already adapted to my erratic train of thought. He whispered, answering Miss Sterling, your subordinate is 24 this year. 24 is good, 3 years older than me. I don't do younger men. The noisy night rain came quickly and left quickly. I stood up to close the window, looking at the man behind me who was almost a head taller than me. Where is your tattoo? Show me. My old man had a perverted hobby, which was tattooing all the shadow guards raised at home. I didn't understand it before, but later I surpassed my father. The candle light in the room was dim, but I saw the tips of his ears turn red for a second. "It's below the waist. Does Master want to see?" After I nodded, he lifted his hand to untie his sash. His waist was bound with white bandages, faintly oozing blood. As he breathed, his 8-pack abs were pulled tight. They looked very touchable. Ethan turned his back. Below the belt line, there was indeed a blurry trace. I took a few steps closer and unceremoniously pulled his pants down a bit. A complete tattoo appeared before my eyes. He was indeed my family's shadow guard. "All right, put them on." I casually squeezed his butt. The man with his back to me stiffened, holding his breath. In the dim night, I couldn't see his expression clearly, but I could imagine it. I looked down at my hand. This damn muscle memory. Sorry, force of habit, just bear with it. Chapter 2. It couldn't be helped. I was used to squeezing my ex-boyfriend's butt. It really was just a force of habit, he could believe it or not. But it was quite perky, and the texture was good. Ethan said nothing. He simply lowered his head and picked up his clothes. I was still staring at his waist, thinking about the tattoo. The tattoos on the shadow guards were of their own choosing. The lower back is a very common location, considered a standard choice. The sluttiest tattoo I've ever seen was on my ex-boyfriend. Mentioning this, I am willing to respectfully call him the ex-hubby. Of course, I was the one who suggested it, but I didn't expect he would actually remove his old tattoo and get a new one for me. He even tried to make me do the tattooing myself. I was afraid I'd cripple him, so I politely declined. Thinking about it now, I regret it a little. I should have just crippled him. Perhaps seeing that I remained silent, Ethan hesitated and asked, "Master, do you still want to see?" I slowly looked away. What is there to see? There's nothing good to look at. Only then did he put his clothes on, standing quietly by my side. Shadow guards always had a low presence. Usually, you couldn't even hear them breathing. I got tired of standing and leaned back. As expected, what welcomed me was a warm, broad embrace behind me. It was just that the man was very nervous, his body tense as a hard rock. I had asked Ethan why he appeared in the mountains where I lived. Ethan said he was being chased after a failed mission and stumbled upon me right before dying. Sounded quite coincidental, but my home was 10,000 miles away from here. I chuckled and made no comment. Life went on peacefully. My daily routine was to take a walk on the mountain and occasionally stroll in the city. Ethan cleared a space in the storage room for himself as a bedroom. Except for when I looked for him, he wasn't in my line of sight, most of the time very diligent. For a shadow guard, his cooking skills were unexpectedly good. The food he made was actually appealing in color, smell, and taste. The first time Ethan served the dishes, I lifted my chin to signal him to take a bite first. He quickly refused, saying he had already eaten. I said I didn't mean for him to eat with me. I was afraid it was poisoned. He was silent for a long time, looking a bit hurt, but he still obediently took a bite of every dish. From then on, every day after cooking, he would always take a bite in advance and then look at me with those pitch-black eyes. He was a dashing shadow guard, 6'1" tall, yet every time he looked at me, he looked just like my dog. However, I didn't fall for that. After sending him away, I started eating. When I picked him up, I had fed him a messy pile of medicines. Among them were many poisons I had swiped from home years ago. I thought they had expired, but I didn't expect the poison to flare up so quickly. That night, just as I was about to sleep, I heard a strange sound coming from the storage room. The muffled sound of a man panting. It was very erotic. Alarm bells rang in my heart. I immediately threw on a cloak and went over. If Ethan dared to fool around in my courtyard, I had already decided where to bury him. There were no signs of a fight in the courtyard. I pushed the door open, prepared to see a ruffian and a woman's undergarments, but what I saw was unexpected. There was no candlelight in the room. Borrowing the faint moonlight behind me, I saw Ethan wearing only a single layer of black innerwear, curled up on the ground trembling. Hearing the noise, he struggled to look up. The moonlight reflected in his eyes, making them look wet. I took 2 steps closer to him and realized they really were wet. He was actually crying. Cry, 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 what are you crying for? My good fortune is being cried away by him. The tip of the man's nose was covered in cold sweat, his wet black hair stuck to his cheeks, and there was shocking red beside his lips. "Master, don't come over." Seeing me approach, Ethan spoke. His voice was deep and hoarse, obviously enduring immense pain forcibly. More blood spilled from his mouth. The moisture in his eyes was physiological. I stopped in front of him, looking down and quietly appreciating the scene for a while. I found that Ethan looked very good vomiting blood. A battle-damaged cool guy, I love it. I also love to top him. The man frowned tightly, his eyelashes trembling constantly. Perhaps because it hurt too much, the veins on his neck and arms bulged, making him look even sexier. Seeming to realize I was staring at him, he coughed twice and vomited another mouthful of blood. My, the bitterness trick. He could clearly swallow this blood. Don't ask me how I know. My ex-hubby did this all the time. I watched for a while longer. It wasn't until Ethan literally fainted from pain in front of me that I realized if I didn't save him, this guy would really kick the bucket. I had long forgotten which antidote was for what, so I could only stuff them all into him at once. I abandoned the idea of carrying him to the bed and sat cross-legged beside him. Is there a screw loose in your brain? Didn't you know to ask me for the antidote? I asked seriously after he woke up. Ethan was silent for a long time. His face was strangely pale, his tone weak. I thought Master wanted to see this. He understood my kinks quite well. I became alert. Although I used to play with shadow guards at home, I didn't think he had the guts to sit on the roof and eavesdrop. Someone else must have told him these things. I raised my hand and gently brushed his hair away. Ethan looked somewhat flattered. Coupled with his miserable state, he looked like a puppy picked up from a trash heap. Is that so? I smiled, then raised my hand and slapped him. The sound was crisp. Ethan turned his head aside. There was a bright palm print on his cheek. Who sent you? I shook my numb hand, thinking a whip would be more effective. No one sent your subordinate. Quite stubborn, biting onto one sentence and not letting go. Reminded me of my German shepherd again. Then do you still know what I want to see? Ethan got up and knelt in front of me, looking down at the ground. Your subordinate's life was saved by Master. Master can do whatever she wants to your subordinate. He got smart. I sat on his bed looking at him. Come closer. He obediently kneeled forward 2 steps. I kicked him. Of course, he didn't budge. His muscles weren't trained for nothing. I just wanted to test the feeling. Just as Ethan was hesitating whether to lie down, I sneered and then stepped down on him. He clearly didn't realize I would do this. He glanced at me quickly, then lowered his head, not daring to say a word. Shadow guards are good at hiding emotions, but he was indeed startled by my action. Although there was no mirror, my expression right now must have been unpleasant. Ethan knelt straight, hands folded behind his back, the standard punishment posture for a shadow guard. I lightly kicked his abs twice, making him come closer to me. The door was wide open. If someone passed by, they would see a woman in white sitting in the room, with a muscular man in black kneeling in front of her. It looked like a perfectly normal scene. Watching Ethan close his eyes in endurance, the red marks on his face not yet faded, his abs tight from the stimulation. Looking exactly like a pitiful creature who had been ravaged, my mood suddenly improved a lot. I knew the limit. Although shadow guards are very good at enduring, thanks to my ex-hubby, I knew exactly where a shadow guard's limit lay. Seeing his expression gradually become dazed, I smiled. In the next instant, he arched his body uncontrollably from the pain. Heavy and suppressed breathing sounded in the night. Messy black hair covered the expression on Ethan's face. It took him a few moments to resume his kneeling posture. Your subordinate was wrong. His voice carried hoarseness and restraint. Not quite passing, I shook my head internally. Of course he felt terrible. I never intended for him to feel good. Seeing him not enjoying it made me enjoy it. Get out. I didn't intend to really torture him. Yes, the man stood up to leave. Watching his stumbling, retreating figure, I was just about to grab a soft pillow when my hand grabbed empty air. Only then did I remember this was the storage room he lived in. I was actually the one who should go. I told the wrong person to get out. I felt no guilt whatsoever. Instead, I studied the small bed he slept on. It was made of 2 tables I didn't want pushed together. A hard little bed to lie on, with nothing on it but a mattress. My dog's bed was more luxurious than this, but it wasn't as clean as his bed. The next morning, Ethan appeared in front of me as if nothing had happened, holding hot chestnut cakes in his hand. He ran into the city early in the morning. His physical fitness was quite good. I glanced below his waist and asked sincerely, Are you okay? Thank you for your concern, Master. Your subordinate is physically unharmed. I couldn't be bothered to ask anymore. I lifted the quilt, preparing to get dressed. He immediately turned his back. I narrowed my eyes and saw the roots of his ears turn weirdly red. I looked down at the camisole I was wearing. Good grief, I played myself. Physiologically speaking, for a virile shadow guard in his 20s who really had a crush on me since childhood, this reaction was normal. I stared at his waist. Have you been used before? I have always been lenient with myself and strict with others. I don't want damaged goods. He didn't mind me objectifying him with the word used. Instead, with his back to me, he said, Master, your subordinate is very clean. If Master wants, your subordinate can serve in bed. Shadow guards aren't allowed to have relationships with others, let alone linger in brothels. Thinking of the methods my ex-hubby used to discipline them, I believed that he was clean front and back. Dismantle that dog kennel of yours. Sleep with me tonight, I said. He probably didn't expect it to be so fast. He was stunned for a few moments before responding. Ethan was a little nervous today. I could feel it, especially after night fell. I got up from the bath and put on my close-fitting innerwear. It was almost winter, and it was too cold outside. I didn't want to walk a single step, so I let Ethan carry me back. Your subordinate apologizes for the offense. Lying in Ethan's arms, I leaned into his neck and sniffed. It was the scent of soap locusts. I reassuredly rubbed his chest muscles through his clothes, and felt his steps pause significantly. He gently placed me on the bed and turned back to close the doors and windows. Ethan must have washed himself many times. His skin was scrubbed red. Do you really know how to serve me in bed? I asked curiously. He lowered his eyes, his tone very light. Master can use your subordinate however you wish. So he knew. That night I was in a rare mood, leaving the pleasure to myself and the pain to the person beneath me. Chapter 3. Friends, a muscular, loyal dog shadow guard whoever tries it knows. It smells intoxicating. I enthusiastically tested various tools on Ethan. Since it was his first time, being handled by me was already hard enough. Every time he saw me take out something new, his body would tremble, but he still obediently let me do as I pleased. I tied him to the head of the bed with a red rope, purely for decorative purposes. If he wanted to resist, that rope would be like a child's toy in his hands. That he could refrain from snapping the rope relied entirely on his powerful self-control. The red candle tipped over. Ethan's tense muscle lines were beautiful, and his eyelashes wet with tears were also very lovely. He could endure even more than I imagined. I forced him to open his eyes and look at me. The puppy's eyes were wet, but filled with loyalty to his master. I pityingly stroked the red marks on his waist, my fingertips stopping on that tattoo, rubbing it constantly. Did Mason Blackwood ever tell you that I hate people who don't make a sound? I spoke suddenly, watching his waist stiffen as he looked back at me helplessly. Mason Blackwood is the name of my ex-hubby. I said it on purpose. Your subordinate didn't do as well as Commander Blackwood, is that it? He spoke tremblingly, and because his hands were bound with red rope, he could only half turn to look at me. Ethan looked truly hurt. I brushed my fingertips over his wet eyelashes. What do you think yourself? I threw the question back. He lowered his head to apologize, and seeing my hand move away, he chased after it, kissing it carefully. I only just realized that the timing and location of Ethan's appearance were too coincidental. My family wished I would die out here. How could they possibly send a shadow guard to my door for me to play with? I looked at Ethan's sweaty back and thought about it. The only person who could remember my kinks at a time like this was Mason Blackwood. My messy history with him would be enough to write another book. In short, between his life and me, he chose his life. He didn't understand me. I was very sad. Although he lost his life, metaphorically risked it, I lost my love. When I ran away from home, he didn't even come out to see me off. That scumbag, I digressed. I withdrew my thoughts and looked at the constantly trembling man. Cold sweat was breaking out on his forehead. He heard about the same as he looked last night. I understood. Ethan Wright, a premium selection strictly chosen by the ex-hubby. No wonder he suits my taste so well. We tossed and turned for over 4 hours, straight until dawn. In the end, Ethan really couldn't hold it back anymore. He even snapped the red rope, secretly clutching it in his hand. I pretended not to see. Looking at the whitening sky outside, I made him change the sheets and bedding, deciding to get some beauty sleep. "Master, can your subordinate go to the outhouse?" He knelt at the head of the bed, his voice trembling, his chest covered in sweat. I glanced at him. There was no blood left in his face. I also glanced below his waist and took down a silver hairpin. Considering this was his first time being ravaged by me, I nodded to let him go quickly, then come back and sleep with me. Ethan finally let out a sigh of relief. After he left, I played with the blood-stained silver hairpin in my hand. It was very sharp and thin. The pearl cap on top could be opened, leaving a needle-sized slit inside where something could be injected in advance. It was something I had custom-made for Mason back then. Average people couldn't stand it. Mason hadn't tried it yet. I didn't expect Ethan to use it first. When Ethan returned, seeing me still holding the silver hairpin and studying it, his steps paused and his ear roots looked even redder. Aren't shadow guards supposed to hide their emotions? Why was he so easily shy? He knelt by the bed. The man's warm breath came close to me. "It's dirty. Your subordinate went to wash it." I let go, and the silver hairpin fell into his hand, but a smear of residual blood remained on my hand. I rubbed my fingertips and glanced sideways at him. Ethan lowered his eyes and leaned closer. He actually licked it. His wet, hot tongue retracted quickly. Seeing me looking at him with a faint smile, Ethan was also a bit nervous. His Adam's apple rolled, and his voice was magnetic and hoarse. "Forgive your subordinate's offense." I raised my hand and rubbed his abs, then turned over. "Go to sleep quickly." Winter was coming soon, and the floor heating wasn't lit. Having a shadow guard under the covers was like having a giant heating pad. I burrowed into his arms, ignoring the man's instantly stiffened body, and found a comfortable position to sleep, warm and very intimate. It was already afternoon when I woke up. I yawned as I sat up, reaching out to poke his abs. I knew Ethan hadn't slept at all. He maintained the same posture the whole time, and the reason his body remained so hot was that he was circulating his internal energy. It took a lot of mental effort. "Your subordinate will go make food." Ethan let me poke enough before speaking. He got up, picked up his clothes from the floor, and put them on. I quietly appreciated the view. I started dating Ethan. Of course, this was a unilateral decision by me. Every night I burrowed into his arms to sleep. I felt our love was stronger than gold. Ethan turned into a male nanny, doing laundry and cooking for me during the day, and getting topped by me at night. Conscientious and diligent. A model worker. But what I said that day really hurt him. I compared him to Mason in bed. No man could stand that provocation, even if Ethan was the one on the receiving end. "What Commander Blackwood can do for Master, your subordinate can also do," Ethan said, the corners of his eyes red, his body covered in whip marks. I admit, this look of his really moved me. If I were still at home, I would definitely help him take out Mason and support Ethan to become the Shadow Guard commander. Experiencing the joy of a tyrannical ruler. What he can't do for me, you can also do. I touched him all over. Ethan frowned, seeming a bit puzzled. "What does Master refer to?" He overstepped, but I was in a good mood, so I told him anyway. "Die for me?" Ethan fell silent. His cries became perfunctory, his brows and eyes holding emotions I couldn't read. He was definitely hiding something from me. My mind moved. "Is Mason finally dead?" Ethan looked up at me and answered in a low voice, "Commander Blackwood is living very well." Oh, never mind then. That day, I took Ethan to the streets. Light snow began to float in the sky, and the streets were quickly covered with a layer of silver frost. He took out a prepared oil paper umbrella and opened it for me, standing one step behind me, accompanying me as I wandered aimlessly in the street. I sniffed, feeling a bit cold, so I took the hand of this warmer named Ethan and asked him to warm it for me. However, ancient people are conservative, especially with an identity like a shadow guard. Although he didn't pull away, he didn't dare to hold my hand back. "Master, we are outside," he reminded me vaguely. "What, you think being with me lowers your status?" I glanced at him. "Your subordinate dares not." He immediately lowered his head and stopped talking. Although his expression was cold and solemn, there was a trace of joy hidden in his eyes. Tusk, lovesick brain. The advantage of having a shadow guard boyfriend is that he won't resist whatever you do. He puts you first in everything. I enjoyed it very much. We walked into a tea house. Ethan put away the umbrella and brushed the snowflakes off my fur coat. The older lady in the tea house welcomed us in cheerfully. I ordered some flower tea and pastries, then felt a bit hungry, so I asked Ethan to go buy me steamed buns. Ethan got up and left. The lady beside me said cheerfully, "The affection between the little lady and her husband is truly wonderful." Ethan's step stumbled. He turned back quickly, while I met his anxious gaze and spoke. "It's all right, I guess," I evaluated. We were still in the honeymoon phase. It might not be the same in 2 years. There were many people at the bun shop, so I waited a while before Ethan came back. The man was dressed in black, his black hair tied behind his head. The aura around him was cold and stern, a look that said, "Strangers keep away." He walked up to me and carefully put down the buns from his bosom. After the snow stopped, with the mentality of, since we're already here, I took Ethan to the host club. The gigolos on stage had various styles, twisting their waists like snakes, seductive and alluring. There were slutty ones, pure ones, older ones, and younger ones. One was currently holding my arm, asking me coyly why I arrived so late. He was a year older than me and looked incredibly seductive. 2 years ago, acting coquettish like this was cute. Now it just gave me chills. Politely declined. Seeing me frown, Ethan immediately raised his hand to stop the gigolo who wanted to follow me into the room. "Who are you?" The gigolo, who was acting coquettish a second ago, stopped and frowned at the black-clad man in front of him. "Scram," Ethan spat out one word. Oh, he knows how to be fierce. I sat in the room watching the drama with interest. Only when Ethan faced others could I see a few traces of a shadow guard in him. His gaze was cold, his expression solemn, revealing a bit of murderous intent. "Hey, no killing allowed." I called Ethan into the room and asked him to watch the gigolos twist their waists with me. He looked a bit unhappy but didn't dare show it. "How about this one?" I pointed to the one twisting the most happily. He was wearing crimson sheer gauze, with only a few beaded chains on his upper body, bells on his ankles, and a beaded veil on his face. His appearance was bewitching and charming. Seeing me point at him, he twisted even more happily. "As long as Master likes him." Ethan turned his head away, his tone a bit muffled, emotions indiscernible. The gigolos here were all pale, young, and thin. None had arms as big as his, nor were they as tall as him. I didn't know I had given Ethan some body image issues. I just said excitedly, "That's the one." Ethan pressed his lips tightly together. He went out to pay and brought the man on stage over to me. As soon as the gigolo came in, he threw himself onto me coyly. Ethan closed the door for us and guarded the door dutifully, looking somewhat lonely. Actually, the gigolo twisted really well, but he was too open. If I hadn't stopped him, he would have run onto me to twist. Unfortunately, I don't like this pale, young, thin type. I like messing with muscle men like shadow guards. I stripped the gigolo's clothes off, wondering if Ethan would rip them if he put them on. The gigolo was happy to serve someone like me who spent money without demanding serious work. He said the clothes were elastic, that deadpan face big brother outside wouldn't rip them. Hearing someone call Ethan deadpan face big brother, I couldn't help but laugh. Although this room was soundproof, a shadow guard's hearing was better. Ethan's back looked even more pitiful. I brought Ethan to the host club for serious business. When time was up, I pushed the door open and dragged Ethan straight to my destination. The shops inside the club had just opened. The dazzling array of accessories on the wall was dizzying and made one flush with excitement. I pulled Ethan into the crowd and matched a set according to the outfit on the gigolo just now. I also bought a pile of unmentionable things, like moving bells and such. Finally, looking at those small, exquisite accessories similar to earrings, I couldn't help but hold them up and compare them against Ethan's chest. Good, good, good. Gold ones, silver ones, and jade bead ones get a set of each. Ethan didn't say a word the whole time, only his face got redder and redder. I asked him if he wanted to wear them, warning it would hurt. He said it was entirely up to me. I had a bountiful harvest and was in a great mood. Taking Ethan out of the host club into the snowy night, the cold wind rustled. The street was empty, except for a black figure with his back to us. 2 figures fell silently in front of him. He lowered the sword in his hand. Fresh blood dripped from the tip. Oh, stumbled upon a murder scene. Ethan shielded me behind him, a hidden weapon in his hand. Wait, looking a bit familiar. Not sure, let me look again. I poked my head out from behind Ethan. The man not far away turned his cold face, blood splattered on it. The moment he saw me, he was obviously stunned. Enemies really do cross paths. This cold-faced, unlucky guy, wasn't he my ex-hubby? 3 years no see, and he was still ridiculously handsome. Chapter 4. Running into your ex-hubby while shopping with your current boyfriend is surreal enough. Mason stood still holding his sword, his hair and coat flapping in the wind. The snow blew against his face, blurring his handsome features. Our breakup hadn't been pretty. Seeing my ex-hubby looking so presentable now felt worse than if he'd killed me. I stood there, gazing at Mason from afar, trying to decide what BGM should play in my head to match the mood, when Mason's lips moved. What did he say? Did he just curse at me? Alertness rose in my heart. In the next instant, Ethan blocked me. "Master," it was still that pleasant, magnetic voice. I glanced at Ethan and saw a rare panic on his face. "Don't be afraid." Although I didn't know what he had to be afraid of, I comforted him subconsciously. The snow fell harder, the cold wind cutting like a knife. Ethan opened the umbrella for me, blocking the severe cold, while Mason sheathed his sword and walked toward me. "Miss Sterling." After so many years, Mason's voice sounded a bit hoarse. Did he catch a cold? My gaze fell on his face. Frost settled on his cold brows. Not having seen him for a few years, he had a scar on his forehead. It was very shallow, but it affected his aesthetics a bit. I frowned. He could have scars anywhere, but not on this face. Back then, I started a romance with him purely for this face. I used to think shadow guards were all rough men. When I saw Mason, I was stunned by his heavenly looks and insisted on keeping him by my side. Mason also realized I was looking at his forehead. His gaze was dark as he looked at me, holding emotions I couldn't understand, as if I owed him millions. Does Miss Sterling not remember how this scar came to be? He was still looking at me, his tone slightly bitter. Oh, I blinked. Now that he mentioned it, I remembered. I smashed that scar onto him. Back then, I wanted to leave. Mason not only didn't help me but advised me to leave 2 years later, saying he would handle everything. Actually, he overthought it. I didn't want to elope with him, I just wanted to leave by myself. That was the only time he resisted me, locking me in the room for half a day. Only I ever locked him up. How dare he try to imprison me? Could I tolerate that? If I indulged him any further, would he try to play forced love with me? So when he came in, I smashed everything on the table at him. He knelt there and let me smash things. Finally, an inkstone hit him hard, and his head immediately started bleeding. Then I left. He learned to play the victim now. Scumbag, my gaze toward Mason became more complex. He realized it and just forced a bitter smile. Is Miss Sterling doing well now? I didn't speak. Whether I was doing well or not was none of his business. Mason just took a step forward when Ethan raised his arm to block him, gripping that dagger in his hand. Master is very well. No need for Commander to worry. His voice was cold. It was the first time I heard him use such a tone. Oh, what kind of love triangle is this? I leaned into Ethan's embrace to watch the drama, conveniently stuffing my hands into his lapels to warm them. Mason watched my practiced movements and clenched his fist in silence. 2 men in black confronted each other. Mason didn't expect to be blocked by his own subordinate. He glanced at Ethan, a trace of ruthlessness flashing in his eyes. I knew Mason too well. Almost every shadow guard he looked at like that on the training ground had been flayed alive by him. To reach the position of shadow guard commander, he wasn't a good person to begin with. I just trained him into my dog. Scram! Mason's tone was bland. This sentence was directed at Ethan. They were about the same height. I had to look up to see their contest. Ethan naturally didn't move. Mason's index finger holding the sword twitched. Having just killed someone, he was shrouded in a faint aura of killing intent and the smell of blood. It was quite annoying. I pushed the umbrella away and spoke from beside Ethan. That's enough, I'm still here. Are you pretending not to see me? Cursing my current boyfriend in front of me was no different from cursing me sure enough. Hearing my voice, Mason's finger retracted, and that killing intent dissipated. Miss Sterling, I didn't mean that. I don't care what you meant. I grabbed Ethan's hand and interlaced my fingers with his, looking at Mason. Mason looked at my hand holding Ethan's. Finally, he couldn't speak, just staring at me blankly. True, although Mason and I had a romance back then, kissed, and went to bed, we never held hands in front of outsiders. He was quite the pure romantic. He couldn't stand this. I'm living very well. It would be even better if you rolled far away. You sent Ethan, right? I like him very much. Thanks. Dropping these two sentences, I pulled Ethan and turned to leave, giving Ethan plenty of favoritism. I gave Ethan a look, but he obviously didn't understand. He was stiff the whole time. While I held one of his hands, his other hand awkwardly reached around to hold the umbrella for me, his eyes stealing glances at me constantly. I said, "Ethan, relax. I was just playing with him, but with you, I'm playing for real." The cold wind blew my words backward. I knew Mason hadn't left. These few sentences were enough to make him sad for half a year. Can't help it. I prefer to spoil my obedient current boyfriend. I have to thank my ex-hubby for this. The wind and snow were heavy at night. Ethan carried me up the mountain. Lying on his shoulder, my fingers played restlessly with his Adam's apple. The man's Adam's apple rolled. Was what Master said just now true? I nodded. Master's words weren't just to anger Commander Blackwood. I paused. Put that way, my actions just now did seem like using Ethan to vent anger on Mason. Why anger him? I was serious, I coaxed. The man's ears turned red. I pinched them, feeling a bit capricious. By the way, how did you dare to block him just now? He is your superior. Ethan didn't stop walking. As long as Master wishes, he doesn't have to be. Stopped calling him Commander, too. This kid has rebellious thoughts. I understood Ethan's subtext. As long as I wanted, he could turn against Mason at any time, even resorting to arms. Whose martial arts are better between you two? After playing for a while, realizing Ethan's breathing was a bit unsteady, I let go and asked curiously. The man was silent for a moment. About the same. A very perfunctory answer. How much is about the same? But I still felt Mason's martial arts were slightly higher. Otherwise, how could he become commander in just a few years? For the sake of Ethan's pride, I didn't say this. Shadow guards learn killing moves. If the two of them fought, one would likely die. I imagined that scene and shook my head. Fighting and killing is unhealthy. I only knew Mason was crazy, but I didn't expect him to do something like this. At night, looking at the man who had tied himself up with red rope on the bed, I stopped in my tracks. Mason frowned slightly, the corners of his eyes red and wet, panting uncontrollably from his mouth. I glanced at him. According to my old preferences, he did everything perfectly. Except he was wearing pinroos. No, Ethan's sheer clothes. You are so slutty, I commented seriously. He smiled, his voice slightly hoarse and blurry, obviously holding something in his mouth. Doesn't Miss Sterling like me like this? Indeed, no one knew what I liked better than Mason. All my preferences and intensity levels were tested on him, nearly breaking him several times. Mason's frown deepened. Only then did I notice he had actually taken medicine. I picked up the empty bottle next to him. The cold bottle pressed against his body, shocking a muffled groan out of the man as he actively pressed towards me. If it were Ethan, he would only look at me with aggrieved eyes. Where is Ethan? Dead, Mason answered quickly, bowing his head to kiss my fingertips, carefully placing the thing he had in his mouth into my hand. It was the small ring I bought for Ethan, the one with golden hollow bells. Ethan hadn't used it yet. I raised my hand and slapped Mason. In the night, the slap sounded crisp. I used heavy force. You can eat indiscriminately, but you can't speak indiscriminately. He smiled at me, not caring about the slap at all, just clinging to me affectionately, his tone holding indescribable emotions. Does Miss Sterling truly like him? I thought Miss Sterling was just playing with him. Sending someone to me to play with first, waiting until I got tired of Ethan, then appearing himself he thought beautifully. What does Miss Sterling like about him? Does he know Miss Sterling's preferences as I do? Can he endure like I can? Or is he as willing to sacrifice everything as I am? Mason looked up. He forced a smile which, paired with his swollen cheek, looked somewhat miserable and pitiful. Ethan is very good. I stared into his wet, affectionate eyes and said seriously. He's younger than you, more durable than you, and sluttier than you. Mason, you're old. As soon as these words came out, the ambiguous atmosphere in the room vanished for a moment and Mason's smile froze. Actually, he wasn't old. I just hated his cleverness. I looked down at the exquisite toy in my hand, raised it, and granted Mason's wish. Without any preparation, and Mason hadn't worn this for a long time, it should have been very painful. But Mason just watched me quietly, not caring about the blood flowing down, as if he couldn't feel pain. He couldn't be getting off on this, could he? I looked him up and down weirdly, then turned and left. Chapter 5. I found Ethan in the storage room. He sat cross-legged on the ground, regulating his internal breath. His face was pale as paper, with spots of blood at the corner of his lips, looking like a stray dog that had lost a fight. Anger rose within me. I went up to pick him up. Of course, due to the actual height difference, he stood up by himself. "Master." Ethan wiped the blood from his lips, his voice weak. I frowned and stared at him. "Didn't you say your martial arts were about the same? You lost just like that?" Ethan was silent for a long time. He didn't answer the question but said, "He told me that as long as he saw Master one more time, he would never disturb Master again in this life." I laughed as soon as I heard it. If someone else said this, I might believe it, but Mason saying these words was absolute bullshit, just like him shouting purely from pleasure when in extreme pain. "And you believed his nonsense. Do you want to go see what he's doing?" I looked at Ethan and said, "He's using your things, wearing your clothes, and seducing your master." Ethan's expression changed. Obviously, he hadn't expected Mason to lack martial ethics so completely. He was so angry that blood seeped from his lips again. "He hit you?" I stared at Ethan, but he had no external injuries. Why was he vomiting blood? Seeing Ethan silent, I frowned, my tone carrying impatience. "Speak." I hate people keeping things from me, especially those close to me. Ethan also realized my mood change. His Adam's apple rolled, and he looked at me with eyes calm as a lake, anxiety suppressed in their depths. "It's poison." The price to come to Master's side was 3 kinds of poison. I had indeed flirted with many shadow guards back then. Mason chose the one whose physique most resembled his own, and who had the strongest endurance from among them. As Ethan said, his martial arts were about the same as Mason's, so Mason prepared 3 kinds of mind-controlling poisons for him. If he drank them, he could accompany me. Ethan didn't hesitate. He endured several nights of heart-wrenching pain to reach the foot of my mountain. And just now, Mason had accelerated the poison's onset. I laughed out loud. I really scoffed. "Master, I'm sorry. Your subordinate deliberately concealed this matter, keeping Master in the dark." Ethan knelt before me. He dared not look up at me, his tone nervous. I touched his hair, not knowing whether to call him stupid or loyal. To see me, was it worth it? For Master, anything is worth it. He raised his eyes, fervent and pure. I brushed his eyebrows. A rare warmth crossed my heart, but only for that moment. In terms of looks, Mason and Ethan weren't the same type. Mason was strikingly handsome with a sharp edge, while Ethan's appearance wasn't as eye-catching. He was accustomed to serving me with lowered eyes, simple and gentle. Just like right now, his expression looked exactly like a wronged little wife. I turned to find the culprit. "Mason, you've grown bold. Not only did you send someone to me, playing replacement literature, but you also dared to poison people casually." The culprit was standing at my door right now. He still had some shame, knowing to put on clothes. If one ignored his flushed, unbearable complexion, he looked fairly human. "Miss Sterling," his voice trembled. "Where is the antidote?" I asked coldly. Mason wasn't surprised by my words. He just looked at me. The silvery moonlight reflected on him, faintly revealing a flowing fragility. Is he really that important to Miss Sterling? I didn't want to waste words with him. It was already annoying enough that he kept me from sleeping in the middle of the night. Spare me the deep, tragic romance act. I pulled out the sword at his waist and raised it against his throat. "Give it to me quickly. I'm waiting to catch up on sleep." He looked at me, then suddenly chuckled softly. As his Adam's apple bobbed, the sharp sword tip instantly cut his throat, and a stream of thin blood gushed out immediately. I quickly moved the sword tip away. I wasn't crazy enough to want to kill him. Wait, did he disinfect the sword? I remembered there was someone else's blood on it. Would there be cross-infection? I shifted positions and pressed the sword against his shoulder. Mason looked down at his sword, his tone actually holding a hint of joy. "Why doesn't Miss Sterling kill me? This guy, damn it, was even more perverted than me. Didn't you say you couldn't die?" I mocked him deliberately. He was startled for a moment, then took a step toward me. The sword was very sharp. I could even feel it piercing the flesh. That was before. Now that everything is handled, if Miss Sterling wants me dead, it can happen anytime. If Miss Sterling truly hates me, then kill me. He closed his eyes in despair. The man who told me 3 years ago he couldn't die now looked like he truly wanted to die under my sword. Am I some perverted homicidal maniac? One or two of them rushing to the grave if he doesn't find it unlucky? I certainly do. Ignoring the deep meaning in his words, I gave him a stab below the collarbone. Although not fatal, it was enough for him to recover for a while. I stabbed Ethan once, giving Mason a stab too fair enough. All right, give me the antidote and get out. I pulled out the sword and threw it at his feet. Mason bent down to pick up the sword and took out 3 small bottles from his bosom. It matched the number Ethan mentioned. I took the bottles skeptically. Mason's fingertips were unusually hot, and his face was full of infatuation. Miss Sterling can rest assured the poison won't kill him. Mason glanced behind me. Only then did I realize Ethan had been standing behind me, looking at Mason with a dark face, holding a dagger in his hand. This was probably enemies seeing red. Mason thought he sent a concubine to win over the husband's heart for him, but who knew upon returning home, the concubine had become the official wife, and he was kicked out along with his nest. Home base stolen. Furious. Do you know what a qualified ex-boyfriend should be like? I looked at Mason. As expected, he looked at me, hidden anticipation in his eyes. He should be silent and soundless like he's dead. I knew what Mason was thinking. If I hadn't said this, he might have even joined us. Sure enough, as I poured a basin of cold water, the last light in his eyes was extinguished by me. Mason's lips moved. He spoke with difficulty, as if swallowing knives. But I am not an ex-boyfriend. I was silent for a moment, not knowing how to explain. Ethan didn't know the meaning of the word boyfriend, but Mason did. He even knew I wasn't from this world. When I was with him, I had no filter and said all sorts of messy things. He said he wasn't an ex-boyfriend because back then in bed, I called him wifey. That was a privilege only he had. Now you are, I concluded calmly. What's there to feel wronged about? Just be secretly happy. Mason finally left. He lowered his head in despair, his steps light and unsteady, his figure lonely. In that instant, I felt a little pity. He looked really pitiful, like a stray dog. Without me helping him relieve himself, he would probably be uncomfortable for a long time. Don't ask why, ask the training. Master. Ethan's voice called back my thoughts. I threw the medicine bottles in my hand to him. Eat quickly. Sleep with me after eating. His ear tips turned red, and he nodded to follow my steps. At night, looking at Ethan's trembling back, I always remembered Mason's lonely figure. People always have a love-hate relationship with their first love commonly known as being bitchy. Actually, I vaguely knew that what happened back then had something to do with me. During the half-day, Mason locked me up. Many people in the mansion died. After I left, a big fire broke out. Later, my safe escaped from home, and the fact that no one found me for 3 years definitely had something to do with Mason. Master! Ethan's trembling voice came, his eyelashes stained with wet tears. I threw away the remaining golden hollow bell and replaced it with a pair of jade beads for Ethan. Shadow guards were tumbled in the training grounds since childhood, and training shirtless under the scorching sun was common, so few had fair skin. But the jade beads were very white, making the contrast even more erotic. I liked it very much and forbade him from taking them off. Licking the blood on my fingertips clean, looking at the still oozing blood beads, I untied Ethan and asked him to find me a pot of wine. He probably guessed what I wanted to do, but he still obediently brought it. He knelt in front of me. I shook the wine in the gourd, uncorked it, and took a sip myself. It was very spicy, so I fed Ethan a mouthful too. Is your alcohol tolerance good? I asked. Good, the man answered in a low voice. Quite confident, I raised my eyebrows, since he said so himself. Glancing at his chest, I put the matter aside and focused on feeding Ethan wine. I didn't put my hand down, so he didn't dare stop drinking. His Adam's apple rolled continuously. This wasn't ordinary fruit wine, but serious strong liquor. In modern times, drinking like this would make a normal person vomit immediately, if not send them to the hospital. I was pouring wine into Ethan, waiting to see when he would call stop, if his face would flush when he did, if he would disobey me in drunkenness, or show some other state. But I underestimated Ethan. His claim of good alcohol tolerance wasn't a boast. Half a pot of wine down, and he was still drinking. An idea struck me, and I suddenly raised my hand. Clear wine poured over his face in a large area. Caught off guard by the splash of wine, Ethan finally choked. After I moved my hand away, he couldn't help coughing. The strong smell of alcohol filled the room. His chest heaved violently, wet hair stuck messily to his cheeks. The man's eyelashes trembled slightly, muscles tense. He called me master with a hoarse voice, his eyes showing no signs of blurring, but rather clarity. He looked incredibly sexy. My throat rolled, and I poured the last of the wine onto his chest, achieving my initial goal, disinfecting him. This feeling was no less than pouring alcohol directly onto a wound. He hurt a lot, but didn't dodge, only looked up at me, with not even a trace of grievance in his eyes. Only loyalty and adoration. Looking at Ethan now, I secretly regretted that ancient times didn't produce dry red wine. Otherwise, I would definitely give Ethan a red wine back pour. "Bring another pot," I suddenly said. The top is drunk. Naturally, other places need satisfaction too. Chapter 6. I had saved some flower petals in the summer. Crushed and soaked in wine now, they soon presented a faint crimson color. Create conditions if there are none. Ethan didn't understand my actions, but still obediently ground them. I told him he wouldn't understand. This was called ambience. After learning the effect I wanted, Ethan seriously suggested that if he put some blood in, the effect would be much more realistic than flower petals. I was numb. A shadow guard's brain simply has no sense of romance. Flower petal wine counts as a softcore art film. Pouring blood wine? I didn't dare imagine that scene. I politely declined Ethan's suggestion and told him to grind faster and stop thinking about strange things. So the man obediently continued grinding, quickly dyeing the clear liquid crimson. It looked beautiful poured over him, sticky and warm. A very gaudy scene, but I liked it. Normally, with more than half a pot of wine down, no matter how good Ethan's tolerance was, he should have been a bit dizzy. Yet apart from a flush on his face, the man looked no different from usual. I kicked him twice. His spine stiffened for a moment, and he looked back at me. "Does Master have any other orders?" Although still clear-headed, his breathing was lighter than usual, strangely quiet. One mouth has to get drunk. I poured him inside and out thoroughly. Ethan was rarely aroused emotionally. I pulled out the silver hairpin, leaned over, and kissed him, counting it as a reward. He looked somewhat flattered, staring at me motionlessly, the flush on his face deepening. It looked like he was drunk. "Do you like it?" Only then did he look away, lowering his eyes to hide his emotions. "Like. Your subordinate likes it very much." He specifically repeated it twice. I dropped more light kisses. He gradually became confused with passion. The moment his arms circled my lower back, I instantly stopped my movements and held his shoulders down with a cold face. Ethan looked at me. Although he didn't understand why my face suddenly turned cold, he stopped his movements too. "Let go," I said flatly. Ethan also realized this and quickly removed his hands. "Apologies, your subordinate overstepped." He really did overstep this time. I hate the feeling of being restrained. I only like being on top, dominating, the feeling of having everything under control. Even if Ethan was only confused by my kisses for a moment, even if he was willing to lie underneath, he was still a 6'1" adult male. Overpowering me physically was too easy. If I didn't call stop, he might have pressed me into his arms. I hate the feeling of wanting to break free but being unable to. Ethan realized my displeasure. He apologized carefully, saying he wouldn't make mistakes again. By the end, his voice was almost trembling, afraid I would drive him away like I did Mason. I rubbed his head soothingly. A slap followed by a sweet date. I used to do this when training my German Shepherd. To teach Ethan a lesson, after using him, I kicked him out of bed. This was the first time since I started dating Ethan that we didn't sleep in the same bed. I lay on the freshly changed bedding and fell asleep quickly. I had a dream. In the dream, I was still living in the 21st century, abroad, busy and frantic to meet deadlines every day. I went back to my apartment and fell asleep, only to wake up as the eldest daughter of a wealthy family in ancient times. I was confused, but having read many transmigration novels, I accepted it reasonably well. Quesira Sira, but I found this wasn't any novel I had read. After waiting a few years with no system coming online, I confirmed this was an uncharted wild map. Whatever. Holding the mindset of it won't kill me, big deal if I die, and dying is fine, I started conquering the shadow guards I liked. With resources delivered to my door, naturally, I wouldn't waste them. I acted recklessly for a few years. Upon learning my cheapskate father wanted to marry me off, I packed my bags and ran. Make me give birth to children for an ancient man? What kind of international joke is that? I slightly regretted not transmigrating to a matriarchal world where men gave birth to children for me instead. I opened my eyes, and the surroundings were still the familiar furnishings. I rubbed my eyes and climbed out of bed, seeing it was already afternoon. The familiar giant warmer wasn't by my side. I washed up and pushed the door open to go out. With the opening of the door panels, I abruptly retracted the step I had half taken. Ethan was kneeling straight at the door. Judging by the snow on his shoulders, he had been kneeling for a long time. I was astonished and asked what he was doing. Ethan looked up at me. Self-punishment. He provoked me last night, so he had to punish himself. I had heard this term. When shadow guards failed in their duties, besides going to the punishment room, they would generally punish themselves. I was silent for a while, walking to his side. How long have you knelt? Since I went out last night. Good heavens, my heart trembled. In this freezing weather, kneeling all night he'd turn into an ice sculpture. Don't let my warmer freeze into an idiot. What if he doesn't self-heat anymore? I quickly told him to get up, then raised my hand to pull his ears. Seeing they hadn't frozen off, I was relieved. Master need not worry. Your subordinate is fine, still smiling foolishly. Seems he froze stupid. After that day, Mason was indeed as quiet as the dead. No movement came from him. Heavy snow sealed the mountain. Ethan and I stocked up on a lot of food and supplies, living leisurely in the courtyard on the mountain until spring. Occasionally, when bored, I passed the time with Ethan. He was more obedient than any of my ex-boyfriends, yet developed to a much deeper degree. All in all, as a toy, he was very interesting. On the day the mountain opened, I planned to go down with Ethan for a stroll and buy some new clothes. Ethan's few sets of clothes were all black, looking like a bulk buy from a wholesale market. Shadow guards wearing black is standard operation, but seeing it too much causes aesthetic fatigue. If the sizes fit, I would have wanted to put my clothes on him. Taking Ethan around the clothing stores, mainly buying clothes for myself, I improved his outfit along the way. I have to say, a clothes hanger body has its benefits. He looked like a model in everything, except he kept a straight face. Can you smile? I frowned. Hearing this, Ethan tried his best to hook up a good-looking arc quite gentle. That's more like it. I picked a few fresh colors, and finally chose a black outfit with gold thread patterns and dark motifs for Ethan. It looked much more prestigious than his pitch black ones. Ethan and I often came to the tea house on West Street. Everyone in the shop thought we were husband and wife, but Ethan habitually wanted to call me master, which I glared back. Can't break character. Later, Ethan stopped talking and became the handsome, silent mute husband in others' mouths. Today, when Ethan sat down, his first reaction was to frown and grip his dagger, looking up at the second floor. However, I didn't notice this detail, focusing only on ordering food. The older lady at the tea house brought up the flour tea and pastries. The first thing she did was look at my belly, sighing, "A winter has passed. Why is there still no movement in the little lady's belly? Can't give birth at all. My husband is mute. He can't reproduce." I continued to perfunctory her, stuffing peach blossom cakes into my mouth to chew. The lady couldn't connect the relationship between the two, so she turned and left. Ethan poured tea for me. In reality, his heart was blooming with joy. Every time I said he was my husband in front of outsiders, he couldn't hide the delight in his eyes, especially today. I kicked his calf. Uncomfortable? Ethan shook his head, his unseen ear roots slightly red. Ethan and I played hard. He never refused my unreasonable demands, encompassing everything like a male nanny. Just as I was wondering what to buy at the host club later, I suddenly felt a resentful gaze fall on me. Holding the teacup, I looked up and happened to meet eyes with Mason sitting by the window on the second floor. He gave me a deep look, then looked away. The teacup in his hand was about to be crushed. He looked angry and sad. I turned to ask Ethan, when did he arrive? Ethan remembered his mute persona, dipped his finger in tea, and wrote on the table, "Always been there." Oh my, I looked up at Mason again. He had already gotten up and left without saying a word to me. Quite arrogant. I appraised him silently, having long forgotten that I was the one who forbade him from appearing in front of me. On the way back, Thinking of the tea house owner's words just now, I looked at Ethan's lower abdomen and said seriously, "It would be great if you could give birth." 8 babies in one birth. The handsome shadow guard runs away with the ball pregnant. Honestly, if it were Ethan giving birth for me, I might not hate children so much. Ethan's figure paused. He actually spoke seriously. "Your subordinate will think of a way." I didn't take it seriously. Back home, I stuffed him with some unmentionable things, simply satisfying my kink of watching him give birth. It's just a pity it was ancient times. Many tools had to be operated manually, and the simulation wasn't realistic. If I took Ethan back to modern times to do this, I dare not imagine how great my mental state would be. I thought this matter was over. Who knew that when Ethan said he'd think of a way, he really meant it? He had been running into the city constantly these days. When asked what he was doing, he actually said he was looking for a doctor who could make men pregnant. Silence was the Cambridge tonight. I choked speechlessly for a long time, telling him to wash up and sleep early. But Ethan was still working hard in secret. That day he brought back my favorite chestnut cakes, looking somewhat happy. He rarely showed such emotion, so I asked what happened. "Master, can we go to the southern borders?" Ethan sat beside me, his warm male breath approaching, familiar and reassuring. I ate the chestnut cake and signaled him to continue. "Your subordinate heard there is a kind of pregnancy hex in the southern borders. Once planted in a man, it allows him to bear offspring like a woman. However, there is no successor of this hex in the north. We must go to the south to find it personally." He rarely spoke such a long string of words, but the content made my jaw drop. "Are you serious?" I lifted my head from his arms. Ethan looked down at me, his face still serious, with emotions I couldn't understand. "Master wants children, your subordinate must try." After saying that, he looked a bit troubled. "Just that if it's 8, maybe I can't give birth to so many at once. It might take 2 or 3 years to birth them." I covered his mouth, telling him not to say such dirty things anymore. My ears were bleeding. But curiosity got the better of me. Harboring thoughts of novelty-seeking, Ethan and I actually set off for the southern borders. The journey south got hotter and hotter. Ethan circulated his internal energy to lower the temperature inside the carriage, a warmer adjustable for winter and summer. Sightseeing along the way, life was quite free. The carriage couldn't pass through the valley, so I could only ride a horse through with Ethan. Of course, I couldn't ride a horse, so I let Ethan take me. I imagined the scenes of the hero and heroine galloping on horses in period dramas, full of enthusiasm. "Master, sit tight." Ethan's voice sounded by my ear, full of magnetism and gentleness. He held the reins, wind whistling past my ears. I narrowed my eyes and grabbed Ethan's hand, guiding him to hold my waist. Not that my principles changed, but if he didn't hold me, I was going to fall off. I thought it would be a very valiant day. However, the reality was that after riding all day, I lay on the bed with an aching back, feeling like I was falling apart. I had never missed cars so much. Ethan massaged my waist for me. His technique was good, and I fell asleep quickly. The rest of the road was easy. It was like traveling. Until one day, I suddenly received a large package. Inside was a complete set of jewelry made of pure gold and jadeite. Just looking at the craftsmanship, I knew it wasn't from a small workshop. There was a note pressed underneath. "Happy birthday." I turned it over and found a line of small print on the back, wishing Miss Sterling peace and smooth sailing. Today was my birthday, not this body's, but my original self's birthday. This set of jewelry naturally came from Mason. When we first got together, I was obsessed with all kinds of gaudy decorations made of pure gold, calculating in my heart how many millions these would be worth if brought back to modern times. At that time, Mason was short of money. He could only afford a pure gold hairpin for me, not a whole set. I didn't lack a gold hairpin. The gold hairpin Mason bought me was eventually used on himself, and later I forgot where I threw it. "How much do you think these are worth?" I brought the jewelry to Ethan. Ethan said a number. I gasped and asked, "Then what is your shadow guard salary?" I calculated based on what Ethan told me. For Mason to buy these for me, it was enough to spend his coffin money. Maybe he even had to take out a loan. Will he drink the northwest wind to survive in the future? A prodigal and pure-hearted ex-hubby. Seeing my surprise, Ethan said jealously, "He is the commander. He will earn more. Master need not worry about his future life." I tried to mail the jewelry back to him, but I didn't even know his address, so I had to accept it. Mason wouldn't blackmail me into supporting him, right? Given the ex-hubby's character, I suspected it briefly for a few seconds. But he just sent the things, the person didn't appear. By the time we reached the southern borders, it was scorching summer. Ethan and I entered the Meow Village to find the legendary successor of the pregnancy hex. It was a very young girl. When she learned our intention, she stared blankly for a long time before laughing out loud. Pregnancy hex requires a child first before casting the hex. You two stand in front of me. Where am I supposed to find a fetus for you? After some explanation, I realized we misunderstood the meaning of the pregnancy hex. This hex indeed allowed males to nurture things in their abdomen, like various snake eggs and insect larvae, feeding these parasites with flesh. On the day they hatched, they would drill out of the male's abdominal cavity. Theoretically speaking, putting a not yet dead premature infant inside could also make it possible for Ethan to give birth to it. I imagined that scene of being disemboweled and felt too disgusted, so I pulled Ethan away. We had stumbled into a horror gore film next door. Seems parasites still can't beat physiological structure. I sighed secretly again. Why this wasn't a matriarchal world where men gave birth. Not getting the desired result didn't matter to me, I just treated it as relaxation. But Ethan looked inexplicably disappointed. I examined him and felt something was wrong. Why are you obsessed with wanting children? I stared at Ethan, trying to stare a hole in his face. Ethan habitually lowered his gaze and whispered, "Your subordinate thinks that having a child accompany Master might make Master happier in the future." I suddenly felt something was wrong. This isn't right. This is very wrong. We were living fine. Why talk about the future suddenly? Ethan wasn't the type to like children either. Why did he keep thinking about this matter just because I mentioned it casually? At night, I dragged Ethan to bed as usual. Although we didn't get the pregnancy hex, I got a lot of good stuff from the little girl, which was very satisfying to test on Ethan. At this moment, his cheeks were burning hot. Perhaps it was too uncomfortable. Those calm black eyes were full of painful lust now. Endure a bit longer. I leaned close to him, coaxing softly. Ethan's Adam's apple rolled, and he said yes hoarsely. He never refused me. I lowered my head and kissed his eyes. His eyelashes trembled, then lifted to look at me, already misty. My mind kept pondering, and suddenly I remembered something. Many years ago, Mason was in a strange state one night. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me the previous commander died. I didn't take it seriously then, just offered a few words of comfort, my mind more interested in Mason's body. But that night Mason was extremely weird. I clearly didn't torture him much, yet the corners of his eyes were wet, begging me to be harder on him. Later, I forced Mason to tell me what exactly happened. At that time, Mason looked at me the same way, saying that shadow guards' lives were cheap and few lived past 35. The commander was only 29 when he died. He wanted to live longer, to accompany me for a long, long time. I stopped my movements and looked at Ethan. Suddenly, I knew what he was thinking. A cruel reality lay before me. As Mason said, shadow guards generally didn't live long. Training hard in their youth to acquire martial arts and taking many forbidden drugs meant everyone was left with chronic illnesses. Raising shadow guards sounds cool, but inside, they are ground out of human lives bit by bit. Cruel, but it was their fate. Ethan was 25 this year. He didn't know how long he could live. Those old stubborn illnesses might flare up any day. I patted Ethan's back to comfort him. "It's okay. If you die, I'll find the next one." Ethan just looked at me. Suddenly, he smiled. "As long as Master is happy, your subordinate dies without regrets." He was very serious when saying this, his voice deliberately suppressing tremors. Damn it. I blinked my eyes, feeling I might have really fallen for Ethan. Spring went and autumn came. It was winter again. For so many years, Ethan had stayed by my side. It was rare. I didn't develop any aversion to him. Ethan seemed rigid but was actually meticulous. He knew all my habits and made taking care of me his habit. Occasionally, when I was angry, he would use methods I liked to coax me. He handled the boundaries well, and my feelings for him grew stronger day by day. My head is so itchy, I'm growing a lovesick brain. This isn't good. I was very angry, so I kicked Ethan. He didn't understand why, but still obediently knelt by the bed. Only on my birthday every year, I would drag Ethan to sit in the tea house for a while. Seeing Mason's figure appearing in the second-floor tea house allowed me to relax. I was just afraid Mason would die alone out there. After all, he was the first man I played with in this world. He had no family or friends. If he really died, I could at least erect a cenotaph for him. Mason looked quite good. Every year he was as glamorous as ever, handsome as in his youth. On the contrary, Ethan's condition worsened daily. Taking tonics didn't help. Seeing his pale face and blood spilling from his lips during meditation, I knew that day was coming soon. Ethan began searching for the next shadow guard for me. Looking at the men who were exactly like him back then, I only felt annoyed. Helpless but compelled to obey me, he sent that group of shadow guards away. Even for an object, feelings develop after years of use. It takes a long time to break in a new one. Ethan got a bit thinner recently, but as always, he watched the snow with me in winter, picked fruits in the mountains for me in summer, and let me fool around on him at night. Ethan accompanied me for 8 years. He was only 32 the year he died, a very young age. Those few days, I sat under the eaves watching the rain. Ethan stood quietly by my side. The sky was dim, raindrops pattering on the ground. I saw a black-clad man's figure appear in the distant rain curtain. It was Mason. I was surprised for a moment, finding Ethan wasn't surprised by Mason's arrival. He guessed I didn't like newcomers, so he took the liberty to find an old person for me. Ethan held my hand, his voice slightly hoarse. It was I who speculated on Master's mind. Would Master forgive me this once? He was getting bolder, not even calling himself subordinate anymore. But this was the only time Ethan begged me. Looking at the man's haggard face, I nodded. The atmosphere was oppressive. Apart from calling me Miss Sterling at the beginning, Mason didn't speak again, looking like a different person from that night on the mountain 8 years ago. I knew why he was silent. Under this atmosphere, indeed no one could be happy. I didn't allow Ethan to die outside, but he didn't want me to see him die either. Years of poison suppressed by medicine erupted all at once. It was the first time I saw Ethan in such pain. The last thing Ethan said to me was sorry. Actually, he had nothing to be sorry for. Mason held me tightly in his arms, preventing me from going into the room to see Ethan struggling bitterly. This was the last thing Ethan begged him for. He didn't want his ugly state before death to be seen by me, afraid of scaring me. He underestimated me. I wasn't that timid. However, the strength difference between Mason and me was too great. I bit several bloody tooth marks into his arm in anger, but he wouldn't let go. Later, I gave up struggling, standing at the door with Mason. He still looked a bit uneasy. How long until he dies? Listening to the sounds of endurance inside, my tone was strangely calm. Mason hesitated for a few moments. Perhaps another stick of incense. A stick of incense? Too long. I took out the dagger Ethan used for years and said to Mason, "Don't stop me. I'm going to send him off." Mason looked at the dagger in my hand and finally opened the door for me. I didn't want Ethan to be tortured to death by pain, so I raised my hand and ended his life. He made a very soft whimpering sound, but the corners of his lips were smiling. Dying by my hand, I wondered if he would feel a bit more at peace. Ethan looked very wretched. I trembled as I brushed his hair away and whispered to him, "Don't be a shadow guard in the next life. Come to my world and find me." They say hearing is the last sense to disappear after death. I don't know if Ethan heard this sentence because I never dreamed of him even once. Mason helped me handle Ethan's funeral affairs. I sent his bones away with a big fire. Mason stayed quietly by my side the whole time. Although it was bad timing, I still wanted to ask why Mason hadn't died yet. He was already 36 this year. Mason said he didn't know either. Maybe it would be soon. If one ignored his tightly clenched, trembling fists, I would truly believe he had disregarded life and death. Only that day did I learn that the 3 poisons Mason fed Ethan back then had no antidote at all. Both of them knew clearly. I was the only one kept in the dark the whole time. Ethan could have lived longer if he hadn't taken those messy drugs in his youth. "I hate you a little," I said to Mason. Ignoring his stunned expression, I turned and left. Actually, not only Mason fed Ethan drugs. I fed Ethan drugs too. Every time I fed him medicine, I pushed him one step closer to death. Saying this was just to vent my rare guilt. Venting emotions onto others makes oneself much more relaxed. I didn't know that Mason had actually taken those 3 drugs too. I never tried to understand a shadow guard's past. For a time, I treated this world like a VR game. Ethan and Mason were just task targets I successfully conquered. Maybe one day I'd open my eyes and return to my world. After Ethan left, Mason took his place. It seemed Ethan had told him all my habits over the years. I surprisingly didn't feel much change in life. When I voiced my doubt, Mason's hand tidying the bed paused. He whispered, "Miss Sterling's habits have actually never changed." Miss Sterling forgot? The person who was with Miss Sterling at the very beginning was me. His gaze was too hard to ignore, so I smiled awkwardly at him, almost forgetting this guy was my ex-hubby. My life remained unchanged, lazy every day, teasing cats and dogs. Unable to experience lying flat in reality, I lay flat in ancient times for 30 years. That day strolling by the lake, watching the ex-hubby walk out of the water, I secretly sighed at how this man trained. Not only had his appearance barely changed, but at 36, his body was still so good, without an ounce of excess fat. Mason walked to my side, taking my hand and placing it on his abs. I squeezed, watching him voluntarily kneel before me, a man in his 30s, still using the honey trap. After many years, I tasted the ex-hubby again. The feeling was as enthusiastic as back then. He occupied Miss Sterling for 8 years. That's long enough, Mason's jealous voice sounded. He panted intermittently, kissing my wrist constantly, humble and careful. I smiled and put the newly bought golden hollow bell on him. After so many years, he actually still kept the one I put on him before. I didn't feel any guilt about going to bed with Mason. So many men want to marry a concubine before the first 7 days are up after their wife dies. I was celibate for a month for Ethan, who wouldn't praise me for being deeply in love. Whether Ethan was alive or dead, my relationship with him stopped at master and servant and could only be master and servant. Just that as men get older, they inevitably lack some stamina. Although I didn't use his front, it was still quite a turn-off. He was also awkward, flusteredly stuffing the hairpin into my hand. I was silent for a long time, plugging him up as wished. Actually, I knew Mason's life was also fading. His physical constitution wasn't as durable as before. Maybe one day, he would die in front of me just like Ethan. However, man proposes, God disposes. In the 3rd year after Ethan left, a plague broke out in the city. Mason and I were unfortunately infected. He could still move freely, but I didn't like exercise to begin with, and this body wasn't healthy. After getting sick, I could only lie in bed. Mason found many doctors for me, but there was no improvement. Mason refused to believe it, literally kidnapping several doctors from the outer city back for me. Although I really wanted to live, thinking about ancient medical capabilities, I felt it was better not to harbor illusions. It's okay, maybe I'll go back to my previous world. I rubbed Mason's head, but he looked even sadder, his voice trembling. If Miss Sterling goes back to your world, what about me? What about you? You continue living. However, I didn't have the strength to say this sentence. My hand dropped. I didn't leave painfully. It was like falling asleep. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw myself in God's perspective. Oh, turns out my soul was floating in midair. Chapter 7. I watched Mason holding my corpse, shaking as he cried. Having known him for so long, it was the first time I saw him cry like this. I tried to poke his face. Being a ghost should be fun too. However, I passed through Mason's body several times, unable to touch him at all, so I gave up in vain. I looked around for Ethan's soul and found that I was the only lonely ghost in the vast mountains. Ethan must have gone to be reincarnated long ago, feeling a bit empty inside, so I floated back and surprisingly found Mason still holding my corpse. There were dried tear stains on his face. He did nothing, just staring at my eyebrows in a daze. Mason sat there holding me for a day and a night, from dawn to sunset. It was summer. I circled anxiously around him, afraid the corpse would rot and breed maggots. Does he have necrophilia? Just as I suspected, Mason finally moved. He stood up holding my corpse and carefully changed me into new clothes. I thought this was the end, but Mason turned to the storeroom, carefully holding something in his hands. It was the birthday gift he spent a fortune on back then. Back then, Ethan and I were in a passionate relationship. Regarding the ex-hubby's gift, I merely viewed it politely and left it to gather dust in the warehouse. He carefully placed the object in my hair. Only then did I realize it was a phoenix crown. So bold. Who is he marrying me to? I floated in front of him, staring at him, trying to stare a hole in him. Fortunately, Mason didn't dare dress me in wedding robes. He gently placed me on a straw bed paved with flowers, leaning over to kiss my lips devoutly and carefully. He cried again. Such a crybaby. Almost 40, yet crying so ungracefully. I reached out and rubbed his head through the air. Along with the same big fire, my only trace of existence in this world disappeared. Only Mason cared. He buried my ashes next to Ethan's tombstone and piled it with fresh flowers. It was a couple's tombstone. I couldn't help but want to laugh at this straight guy aesthetic. This was truly a hell joke. Before I could grin, in the next instant, Mason killed himself with his sword in front of my tombstone. His movement was too fast, so fast I couldn't react. My smile was only half-formed. The sword fell to the ground, Mason couldn't support himself and knelt. I watched Mason die in front of me helplessly. Fresh blood splattered on the tombstone, quickly spreading on the ground. Before dying, he was still looking at my tombstone, his trembling fingertips touching it. "Miss Sterling?" My soul trembled. What kind of mess is this? In the wilderness, no one will even collect his corpse. But since I could float here, Mason should have a soul too. So I shouted for Mason loudly, waiting for his soul to meet me. However, I found my consciousness gradually blurring. Before losing consciousness, I seemed to meet eyes with Mason. Seemed like I slept for a long, long time. When I opened my eyes again, the surroundings were dim, only a faint blue light flashing before my eyes. I looked at the computer in front of me, sitting there for a long time before realizing I'm back. My phone showed it was 2:12 a.m. In the silent night, only my heartbeat thumped loudly. I tried hard to recall and found I had just napped on the table while rushing a paper. It had been at most half an hour in this world. The 30 years of memories that should have been clear suddenly blurred in my mind. In that instant, I suspected I just had a very realistic dream. Maybe I was too tired. I closed my laptop and went back to my room to sleep wearily. Care if I transmigrated or not, sleep is priority number one now. Head sinking into the soft pillow, sleepiness suddenly vanished. So I took out my phone and typed the name of that dynasty into the search bar. Just as in my memory, it wasn't a real history, but the name appeared in a few web novels. I clicked on them one by one but found none matched. So I started searching for Ethan Wright and Mason Blackwood's names, suspecting my memory. Did I read some Shadow Guard novel or play a game recently, leading to thinking by day, dreaming by night? I told my best friend Zoe about this. She threw me a few Autumn game links, telling me to substitute myself and see which one fit my dream. Although Zoe didn't understand why I liked squeezing men's butts, she respected it and thought I was dreaming. I played through these Autumn games one by one. Even if there were similar settings, they were different. Ethan wasn't an exquisite character under an artist's brush. He was a living person. If placed in an Autumn game, his popularity probably wouldn't be high. He didn't know sweet words, wouldn't actively please, just listened to me very much, silent and taciturn. In the end, of course, I didn't find an answer, so I simply stopped dwelling on it. Because the evil final exams were coming, I had no time to study memories that might be dreams. I practically lived in the library every day, rarely returning to the apartment until the holidays came. That day, I pushed the door open and found a man standing in the apartment hallway. He wore a black hoodie, his face hidden under a cap, revealing a bit of black hair. But the hallway was only so big. Him blocking the elevator was quite obstructive. I said, "Excuse me," in the local language. He didn't seem to understand, so I had to walk around him into the elevator. The apartment lights weren't good, so I didn't notice his tightly clenched fists and trembling shoulders at all. If I had noticed, for my safety, I probably would have called the police immediately. I went to the supermarket downstairs to buy some food, planning to reward myself and welcome the holiday. Christmas was coming soon. Shop windows were full of decorations. Parents walked and played with children, a very warm scene. I grabbed a few bottles of beer from the shelf. Remembering the cocktails Zoe recommended yesterday, I turned to get a bottle of gin and white rum to enjoy being slightly tipsy. When passing the red wine section, I stopped, suddenly remembering that absurd scene in my dream. If conditions allowed, I definitely had to give Ethan a red wine back pour. The man's muscles were beautiful. When tense, they were hard to the touch. His waist was muscular but narrow. I loved it most when he couldn't handle it and arched his back. Being able to drive a macho shadow guard to collapse always gave me a sense of accomplishment. Ethan always broke into a thin sweat in the second half. Sometimes from arousal, mostly due to my bad taste, frowning, eyes closed, and trembling. I always liked to torture Ethan deliberately. He clearly knew, but never complained half a word, truly becoming more like a male nanny. He took care of me and indulged me. I said he was like the German shepherd I raised. Ethan hadn't seen what a German shepherd looked like but nodded in agreement. So I pointed at the big wolf dog at the village entrance, saying actually they looked about the same. Ethan realized a German shepherd was a dog. Regarding my comment that he was like my dog, Ethan said this: "To be master's dog for a lifetime, your subordinate is content." I was confused listening to it, thinking this dog had the potential to be a seductive concubine. Too bad Ethan only was my dog for 8 years. Thoughts pulled back. Actually, I don't like drinking red wine. The taste is too astringent. But thinking of Ethan's sweaty appearance in memory, I reached for a bottle inexplicably. But someone was faster than me. Someone reached over my body and took the bottle of red wine I had my eye on. Isn't this deliberately looking for trouble? Recalling curse words, just as I was about to turn around and argue, my vision was attracted by this person's hand. A pair of distinct, slender hands, a grown man's hands, without excessive body hair like foreigners. Looking at the skin tone, he was Asian, only there were obvious calluses at the tiger's mouth, ground out by holding a blade for years. Looking at those hands, familiar to the point of impossibility, I rarely held my breath. I turned to crash into a pair of pitch-black eyes. He looked down at me, the bottom of his eyes holding uncontrollable joy and excitement. "Miss Sterling, your subordinate has finally found you." He spoke in a low, hoarse voice, identical opening lines. The person in front of me overlapped with memory. It was Ethan, felt like a Korean drama heroine. In that instant, I really felt time stop for a few seconds. War song rise, BGM played automatically in my brain. Should this be called Love Across Time and Space, or My Interdimensional Boyfriend? Either way, it's magical. Just that this height and posture looked like a caved-on wall slam. I hate this posture that feels restrictive, even if the other party might be modern Ethan. Seeing me frown, the man also realized something. He quickly withdrew his hand and took a step back. "Apologies, your subordinate was just too excited to see master." The man lowered his eyes, fists clenching tightly, his voice already choked with sobs. Putting the wine glass into the shopping cart, I took Ethan back to the apartment. He was just like in ancient times, dutifully carrying my bag and opening the door, even reaching out to block the elevator for me. Looking at his skillful appearance, he didn't look like an ancient person at all. Short black hair, normal clothes. The strange man blocking the elevator door was gone. I first checked the door lock for signs of damage before opening the door with peace of mind. As soon as we entered, Ethan knelt in front of me, as if confessing a crime. "Talk." I sat on the chair looking at him, casually opening a bag of snacks. Ethan looked a bit reserved. Upon hearing my question, he seriously narrated the events to me. It turned out after Ethan died, he became a lonely ghost like me, wandering for several days. At that time, he thought protecting his master in this form wasn't bad. But when he opened his eyes again, it was the 21st century. Ethan became a male high school student, possessing the exact same name, appearance, and figure as in ancient times, and inherited the original body's memories. Ethan always remembered what his master said: "Go to Master's world to find her." This bizarre place must be Master's world. Ethan ran away from home that very night and was found by the police called by his parents. I couldn't help laughing. A shadow guard who killed without blinking explosively reformed into a rebellious teen, walking 10 miles in one night. Later, because he couldn't shake off his shadow guard habits, Ethan was even put into a mental hospital by his modern parents for a while. Although he downplayed it, the taste must have been unpleasant. I raised my hand and rubbed his head. He rubbed against my palm carefully and obsessively. "Thank you for Master's concern. Your subordinate is fine." After coming out of the mental hospital, Ethan learned to disguise himself. He learned to be a modern person and continued looking for me. Although having some memories not his own, everything here was new to Ethan. Every time he encountered technology far beyond ancient things, guilt and inferiority would rise in his heart. Master suffered. The world here is advanced, with too many things to pass the time, whereas in his original dynasty, people worked at sunrise and rested at sunset. Master could only pass time on him. This was too unfair to Master. Looking at Ethan pressing his lips tightly in guilt, I smiled and kicked him lightly with my toe. The man immediately knee-walked to my leg. I fed him a snack from my hand, and he ate it without a moment's hesitation. Still quite obedient, there were still crumbs on my fingertips. I pressed the pad of my finger on the man's warm, soft lips, and he licked it clean familiarly and obediently. Except for changing time and body, nothing had changed. Ethan even raised his black eyes to look at me eagerly. I could almost see the tail wagging behind him. According to Ethan, he had been looking for me for 9 years. He searched all domestic cities, large and small, before turning his target abroad. I thought for a while, then suddenly narrowed my eyes at him. Wait, how did you recognize me? Although the names before and after transmigration were homophones, the appearances weren't very similar. I didn't believe Ethan recognized me at a glance based on heart palpitations. Ethan spoke devoutly, eyes unblinking as he looked at me. No matter what appearance or age Master has, your subordinate will recognize Master. Damn it, dogs really have this scent tracking function. I stared at him for a long time, then suddenly asked, "Tell the truth. Did you see someone who looked like me, go up and call them Master, and bump into me by luck?" Ethan's expression froze, blood draining from his face rapidly. He kowtowed tremblingly, saying he absolutely never did such a thing. He only had one master and only called me Master. So scared, obviously a guilty conscience. "How do you prove you haven't done this?" I pressed deliberately, applying force with my foot so the rolling chair moved half a meter away from him. I frowned, looking somewhat disgusted with him. Ethan parted his lips, his face even paler. He looked at me desperately because he found he indeed had no way to prove it. "Master, I'm sorry." He spoke with difficulty, as if his throat was cut. "Your subordinate cannot prove it." Ethan looked drained of strength after saying this, a big guy kneeling there looking lost and soulless. Only then did I hook up a smile. Pure bad taste. Hadn't seen him sad for a long time, so I was happy. Seeing Ethan getting sadder and sadder, I finally said I believed him for now. "Is my world convenient? Do you like it here?" No ancient person should be able to refuse 21st century technology. I waited for Ethan's feedback, but unexpectedly he shook his head at me and whispered, "A world without Master is the same to your subordinate." The room was dim. The man kneeled quietly before me. He retained the shadow guard's habit. His breathing was so light it was almost inaudible, only his chest heaving shallowly. I felt doing nothing would be letting myself down. "Go to bed," I ordered simply. Ethan was stunned for only a moment, eyes filled with incredulous joy. Just like in ancient times, he dared not use force on me. Hands propped on the head of the bed, leaning over to gently sniff my hair, his face full of infatuation. We fooled around simply. Although this body of Ethan's was a virgin, his skills in serving me were perfected. A long-lost feeling. I was a bit excited and accidentally drew blood. He paused, his first reaction actually blaming himself for not being prepared. He looked at me in panic, while I didn't care, just wiping him casually with a tissue. Anyway, he was good at enduring pain, bleeding didn't matter. I asked Ethan to go to the bathroom and open the red wine. He obviously remembered that matter too. I lifted Ethan's chin and poured a few mouthfuls into him first. The steam was warm and misty. Accompanied by the sound of pattering water, the blood like wine poured over the man's shoulders and back, falling to the ground along his long, straight legs, merging with the water. The visual was shocking, a lustful beauty words couldn't describe. I went wild. Ethan's stamina was great. I was exhausted, yet he still had the strength to dry my body and carry me back to bed. I drifted off to sleep nestled in the man's warm embrace. "Master," a low, magnetic voice sounded. I responded lazily, looking up to meet the man's eyes. He looked at me, hesitating to speak. "Speak, your subordinate came to this world because of death. Master," his voice trembled a little. "Did Master return because you finished a lifetime?" A very overstepping sentence. Ethan lowered his head silently after saying it, waiting for my possible explanation or punishment. I pinched his waist hard, forcing him to look up at me. Didn't finish a lifetime. I died of illness the 3rd year after you died, just like you, ended by a fire. Ethan was silent for a long time, gently burying his head in my shoulder, yet not daring to apply weight. Sorry, master, sorry. Ethan kept apologizing. Such a big guy insisting on burying his head in my shoulder. But a good owner won't fuss too much with a large dog. I just patted his back perfunctorily and soothingly. I didn't think there was anything to avoid, so I said carelessly, "Life and death are fated. I lived enough in ancient times anyway. Dying is dying. It's just Mason committed suicide for me, and no one collected his corpse." I paused, pulling Ethan's hair to make him look up. "Wait, if you could come, could he come too?" Ethan froze, evidently not having thought of this. "Perhaps." I thought of the silent figure by the elevator when I went out in the afternoon. Ethan knelt up again, eyes nervous and uneasy. I knew what he was worried about. Between dogs, there is competition for favor. They could coexist peacefully for a few days in the past life purely because Ethan knew he was dying, putting aside old grudges to focus on Master. Now in the present world, Ethan possessed a new identity, a healthy body, and found me, his support for living. Naturally, he would fight with Mason. Actually, I knew even if I rolled with Mason in front of him, he would only bear it silently, only daring to be insanely jealous inside. "Master, want to find him?" Ethan asked carefully. Seeing me look over, he immediately explained, "Your subordinate means, if Master wishes, your subordinate can help Master search." Years of searching for me gave him his own network. But for now, I only wanted to raise one dog. "As long as you're good, I won't drive you away." I petted his head. Ethan busily promised, "Your subordinate will definitely be very good." Ethan's body was very clean, without scars crisscrossing muscles or tattoos. I pinched him a few times while lying in his arms to sleep, nodding with satisfaction only after seeing blue and purple rise. I didn't expect Ethan to be so meticulous. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I saw a bag of things at the head of the bed. I rummaged through it and instantly got excited. "Ethan," I called him holding the thing wrapped in small string, "your subordinate is here." The familiar male voice sounded. Ethan walked out of the kitchen holding a plate. He was shirtless on top, wearing my pink apron, deliberately tied very tight. I raised my eyebrows, watching him put breakfast on the table, then kneel by my bed. Those pecs truly a genuine male nanny. "A bit small, isn't it?" I squeezed unceremoniously, then commented. Of course, talking about my clothes, not him. I saw Ethan's ears turn red. "Apologies, your subordinate wore Master's clothes privately. Please punish Master." I handed over the thing in my hand. Ethan took it and put the power source in my hand. "Know how to use it? Your subordinate knows." Ethan's Adam's apple rolled. I smiled, duplicitous man. Saying he didn't like this world, he actually looked up quite a few guides, buying everything completely early in the morning. Ethan took off my apron, folded it carefully, then put on the items I picked out. I found a piece of tape to stick it on him, turned on the power, and invited him to have breakfast with me. Ethan's phone lay on the table. Following several overlapping vibrations, messages came through. I glanced at his phone. In the next instant, Ethan placed the phone respectfully in front of me. "Master." The password was my birthday. I raised my eyebrows, grabbed his phone, and opened it. Ethan had no privacy before me, just like now. The vibration just now was a news push. I casually opened the browser and saw his undeleted search history. How to please Master? How to persuade Master not to keep other dogs? What breakfast is good for the stomach? A practical house husband type of large dog. Ethan evidently saw it too. He pressed his lips tight, looking at me nervously. I hooked up a smile, indulging this bit of jealousy. Ethan's contact list was very clean, just a mere few people. He explained to me who each person was. I nodded, then took out my phone to add him on messaging app. Ethan took the phone, tapped a few times, then handed it back, asking if this nickname was okay. "Master, as long as you're happy," I said casually. Ethan was certainly very happy. He even smiled secretly several times. I missed the tattoos and scars on Ethan's body, so he prepared tools I could use. Everything else was fine, but when I took out the special ink and tattoo needles he bought, he fell into a rare silence. This obviously wasn't professional equipment. I hadn't learned tattooing, but Ethan trusted me unconditionally. I tied him up, blindfolded him, and placed a tattoo on his inner thigh. Not a pattern, but words, the kind of slut-shaming words that can't be spoken. He trembled ceaselessly. I took a photo of his most wretched and embarrassing moment to set as the wallpaper for our chat, then threw the phone in his face, letting him see clearly the tattoo on his body. A highly humiliating act, yet Ethan treasured it, his ears burning red. Chapter 8. The props Ethan bought were very useful. Except for the boxes of condoms that came free and when unused, I used every item on the man to my heart's content. Including the kink I wanted to see most in ancient times. 1 birth, 8 babies. Handsome shadow guard running with the ball. I deliberately took many videos and photos for Ethan to reminisce over himself. God's perspective impossible in ancient times, now Ethan had hundreds of clips in his phone. He saved and watched each one seriously, very obedient to me. I tried to make him write me a few hundred words analyzing them. The man sat in front of the computer, wearing the gag and fluffy dog ears I bought, but only typed out 2 lines in 2 hours. Didn't satisfy master. Need to reflect. I looked at the screen, then at him, asking seriously, "What did you reflect on? Tell me." He couldn't speak, so he could only perform it for me deeply. After the performance, I continued to ask. Ethan looked urgent, ready to prove his will by death, yet couldn't write an 800-word essay. Shadow guards really lack culture, but I forgave him. Useful is enough. I silently added a few more to the cart. Scrolling through the clothes in the cart on my phone, I let Ethan choose a few he liked. He was very sensible. Only children make choices. He bought them all. The merchant even called him specifically to verify the sizes. The man's tone was serious and solemn, giving no hint of what he was going through. After Christmas, I flew back to the country with Ethan. Just after retrieving luggage, Ethan spoke, "Master, your subordinate called a car. We can go out now." In that instant, several people around looked at us. My face felt a bit hot. Abroad, few understood Chinese, but in the bustling domestic airport, this master was very explosive. Some young people whispered, glancing at us a few times, vaguely hearing things like playing big, unexpectedly femdom male slave, and so on. I pulled Ethan to leave quickly and warned him not to call me master anymore. In that instant, Ethan thought I was abandoning him, freezing in place and almost kneeling. In ancient times, him calling me master was right and proper. In bed, this could be called foreplay. But on the streets of the 21st century, I didn't want to be a subject of discussion yet. He had no shame, I still had some. No, I have to change Ethan's habit. I told Ethan to call me by my name directly. He obviously didn't dare, saying how could he call my given name? "Then just stay mute," I said briefly. The man put away my luggage silently. Like a large dog falling out of favor, he actually started playing mute seriously. He still wanted to be my mute husband. I saw through Ethan's mind but didn't puncture it. I took Ethan back to my hometown. Upon learning he was to meet my parents, the always calm shadow guard finally panicked, not sleeping well for several nights. My shadow guard got up in the middle of the night to search how to make master's parents satisfied with oneself. Of course, he couldn't search up decent answers, clicking into several improper links instead. Not sleeping in the middle of the night, I got annoyed looking at him, kicked him, and asked what he wanted to do. Ethan quickly knelt properly. I took his phone and threw it back, asking him to read what was written on it. Shadow guards lack culture, but luckily he was literate. Looking at the constantly jumping, enthusiastic small ads and the bold, naked text on them, Ethan read and read, gradually frowning tight. Seeing him unwilling to read, I smashed him with a pillow. "This, master doesn't like?" Ethan caught the pillow smoothly, speaking in a low voice. "What do you mean I don't like?" I climbed up to hang on Ethan's back, scrolling through the webpage with him. It was hot descriptions from a standard male gaze perspective. Very disgusting, but very tempting to creatures with testosterone. I glanced at Ethan, arm winding around his neck, pressing my whole weight on him, whispering orders in his ear. "I told you to read. Understood." His body just stiffened for a moment, ear tips reddening, immediately reading obediently in a low voice. The words were filthy. I stared at Ethan, wanting to see if he reacted. He was a normal man. In the 9 years I wasn't there, what did he rely on to masturbate? I observed for a long time, no reaction at all. If we hadn't just played, I'd really suspect he was impotent. Reading halfway, Ethan shut his mouth, phone screen locked tight in his hand. "Please punish, master. Your subordinate doesn't want to read anymore." I was tired of listening too. Yielding to his wish, I clicked open the screen and changed the page. "Then find something you like and read it to me." "Your subordinate doesn't like reading these. Then what do you like to read?" I got interested and pressed. "Except master, your subordinate likes nothing." He lowered his eyes, quite pure. Shadow guards were strong. I hung on him for so long, and he could still maintain a standard kneeling posture. Because sleepiness disappeared, I took out the newly bought toy and tried it again. Ethan's family background in the present world was good. Although he ran all over the world looking for me and ignoring proper duties, he could earn money himself. Just that when I heard clearly how he earned money, I really wanted to call the police. "What did you say you did?" I asked again. "Illegal boxing." The man lowered his head, also realizing the mistake. Couldn't tell. Quite wild privately. Relying on past life techniques and memories, Ethan fought illegal boxing in a Northern European underground gym for 3 months, the kind where you sign a life and death contract. The money he earned hadn't run out yet. He transferred it all to my card. Good fits my perception of a shadow guard. Killing without blinking in ancient times, illegal boxing in modern times. Counts as self-reliance. I glanced at Ethan. "No more fighting." "Yes." Ethan stood by my side. "From now on, I'll be master's bodyguard." The habit of subordinate was changed. This guy would still pop out a master, occasionally. Shadow guard and bodyguard professions are quite aligned. I nodded with satisfaction, then realized I didn't need a bodyguard. Too weird. What decent person brings a bodyguard to the streets? Ethan finally learned modern etiquette and bought expensive gifts and white liquor for my family, counting as 4 boxes of gifts. He seemed to treat himself as a son-in-law visiting for the first time, although I also told my family he was my boyfriend. My parents welcomed Ethan, mainly because his outfit was too imposing, plus the car in the yard, worth nearly 8 figures. He looked like a tycoon. "I just want master's parents to be at ease." This was how Ethan explained it. I didn't know where he got that conclusion. I ignored him and just accompanied my parents at home for a few days. However, the consequence of excessive wealth display was Ethan being surrounded by uncles and aunties in the community, curiously probing which rich family's son he was. My city wasn't big. In this community, everyone knew each other, so Ethan's background became a topic of gossip. Surrounded by old people, Ethan pressed his lips calmly. When leaving, a little boy spilled a drink on his pants, wetting a patch. I turned and walked away. Ethan panicked, chasing after me hurriedly. I hate Ethan getting stained with outsiders' smells. "Filthy." I frowned, glancing at Ethan with disgust. Living in the mountains before, Ethan had no chance to contact outsiders. Now when he went out, he got looked at a few extra times. A feeling of private property being peeped at. It had nothing to do with outsiders. I would only throw this toy away and change for a clean one. Ethan knelt on the ground with a pale face, not knowing what to do. I took him back to my rental. Ethan took off his clothes as soon as he entered. "Master, sorry, I'll go wash clean immediately." "Wait." Ethan stopped, waiting for my order. "I'll wash you." In the bathroom, I turned on the pressurized shower head, aiming it at the man and spraying chaotically. The water was cold, it was still winter. I didn't know how long I sprayed him until I felt he was clean inside before stopping. I turned off the water source, looking at the wretched man. The corners of his eyes were red and wet, looking at me expectantly. His chest heaved shallowly, giving a feeling of having been humiliated. "Master, am I clean?" He choked on water, his voice slightly hoarse. "Passable. Try and we'll see." My guess wasn't wrong. Mason was indeed in the modern world too. Seeing him for the first time, I remembered the black hoodie guy outside the dorm door. That must have been Mason. Although I didn't know why he didn't acknowledge me then, I looked him up and down and raised my eyebrows. Wearing a suit and tie now, looking even more presentable than in ancient times. "President Blackwood, I've heard a lot about you." I looked at the info on the business card and spoke teasingly. "Miss Sterling, don't be like this." Mason lowered his head, tone bitter and sad. Don't know why the timeline of transmigration was messy. Mason had been living in the modern world for 5 years. He adapted well too, running a security company flourishingly. head of shadow guards in ancient times, head of security in modern times. He really didn't forget his original intentions. I praised him a few sentences, exchanged contact info with him, and remembered something. I asked him why he killed himself in front of my tombstone. Miss Sterling was gone. What meaning was there for your subordinate to live? Although knowing the answer, hearing Mason say it himself was still weird. Remembering that eye-catching, passionate read that day, I was silent for a while, then smiled at him. This world is very good. Live well now. President Blackwood, work hard, make it big and strong soon. Maybe my tone was too gentle. Mason froze in place for a moment. As I turned to leave, he actually boldly grabbed my hand. Master. He called me in a low, suppressed voice. Beg you not to go? I pointed at Ethan, whose face darkened at the door, looking like a playboy lingering in flowers. Can't do. I promised to accompany him tonight. Mason held my hand for a long time, long enough that I felt sweat in his palm. I glanced at him. Master, do I still have a chance? He asked humbly, finally lowering his eyes and letting go. Mason had self-awareness. He knew in my heart, Ethan's status was a bit higher than his. Only a bit. I smiled again. Who says no? What if it's the same as the past life? Light instantly came to Mason's eyes. Good, your subordinate waits for Miss Sterling forever. Just saying, God, don't take it seriously. I silently typed one in my heart. The next day, I took Ethan for a physical exam. Fortunately, he was a healthy adult male. I was temporarily still dating Ethan. He still flew domestically and internationally with me, dutifully acting as my spiritual and emotional outlet carrier. One day, I invited him to watch a film I liked. He watched very seriously. Sitting upright made me look at the screen suspiciously several times, thinking I played the wrong thing. That very night, Ethan bought all the props appearing in the film, letting me play as I wished. Ethan's figure was much better than the main actor's. Naturally, I played very thoroughly. Later, settling down back in the country, my family urged me several times about marriage with Ethan, all deflected by me. Although useless, Ethan still got a vasectomy, then forged an infertility certificate and had a serious talk with my parents. In front of 2 parents and a notary lawyer, he transferred all assets under his name to me, saying he had no fate with children, letting me down in this life. So he gave me all the money, willing to work like an ox or horse for me, only hoping I wouldn't abandon him. Quite the actor. I turned the vibration up a notch, watching his speech pause, voice tremble, and eye corners turn red. It looked even more sincere. Later, no one urged anymore. Ethan and I lived in a large flat, days passing happily. Of course, I wouldn't marry. Even if Ethan was good to me, even if I liked him, I didn't plan to establish a long-term relationship with him. Because he could only ever be my dog. How can a pet marry its owner? Looking at Ethan cooking in the kitchen wearing animal ears and a tail, I leaned on the sofa and mischievously pressed the start button. End.